Okay, I've just finished the valve adjustment on this 1966 Mercedes 250S. It is a W108 chassis, and this is the M129 engine, 2.5 liter with the twin Zenith carburetors. But I believe this is pretty universal for a lot of these old 6-cylinders. So basically, once you get your valve cover off, this is what you're looking at. And you have exhaust valves on the driver's side and intake valves on the passenger side. The reason why you know that is when you look over here, you can actually see the exhaust manifold sandwiched around the intake manifold there. You can see 2 intake ports and 2 exhaust ports. There's actually a third right next to it, but if you go in line, you'll see that valve on the outside goes straight over across the cylinder head to an exhaust port. Likewise, you'll see this intake valve right here is directly across from an intake port, so on and so forth. The reason why that's important is because these are adjusted differently. You're looking for 0.08 millimeters on the intake valves and 0.18 on the exhaust valves. So basically, whenever you take your valve cover off, the first thing you're going to try to do is identify what you can check before you turn the engine over. So you're looking for the lobe on the cam to be pointing as upward as possible. And I'm sure that a lot of people say it absolutely has to be pointing straight upward. But as long as you're on the base circle, the adjustment's going to be the same. So if you're on the base circle of that cam lobe, that's what you're looking for. So you can identify, we've got an intake valve here. Now these are already done, but just for reference, then we've got an exhaust valve here. You can see the cam lobe pointing upward. And then there's an exhaust valve there. And it looks like that's it. So it looks like we have 3 right now, basically, that can be identified. And again, these are already done, so I'm not going to be adjusting anything. But the adjustment's easy, but it takes a little bit of elbow grease. You're basically going to put, I used a 14 millimeter crow's foot, and you're going to put it right here on this adjuster, and then you're going to adjust it accordingly. After you get done, make sure that thing's seated. You don't want to get any false measurements. But in order to check these, again, it's 0.08 millimeters intake side and 0.18 exhaust side. So, for instance, we're going to go ahead and look at this intake valve over here, and we've got our 0.08. You probably can't see that, but 0.08. This might be a little bit better angle here. So, for instance, we're going to look at this intake valve right here. You're going to make sure that this fits in there all the way across. See, I can feel a little bit of resistance, but it does fit. So that's what you're looking for. And this particular vehicle, I believe these were probably adjusted. Again, there were a number of things that were done by the previous owner. Now, I asked him about the valve adjustment, and he said, well, I don't think these need it. Well, they do. Any of these solid tappet engines definitely need valve adjustments. So clearly he didn't do it, but he also didn't drive it. Remember, the braking system was faulty, and he bought this car and thought he'd resurrect it and turn a profit. And he got as far as getting the carburetors rebuilt and the entire fuel system redone, and then kind of gave up on it after he realized that the brakes and steering and everything else needed a lot of attention. But I believe that probably sometime prior to his ownership, the valves were adjusted, and I don't know if these really come out of adjustment from sitting. It's to my understanding that they're to be done about every 12,000 miles, so the cam rotating and opening and closing these valves is probably what takes them out of adjustment more so than sitting, but I'm not positive on that. I just know that this one, it needed a couple of adjustments on some intake valves, but very, very minute adjustments, and really nothing on the exhaust side. If you look on that oiler tube, you'll probably see those dots. That's because in order to keep track of what I've adjusted, I just took a paint marker and just put a little dot on top of the oiler tube. That let me know exactly what I've done and where I needed to go. So whenever you're making these adjustments and you're ready to move on, you can actually reach into the car and you can kind of look through the hood here and you can kind of see exactly what you need to, what needs to be done, what lobe you're looking for to move up, especially when you get down toward the end, when you're almost done. You're going to get down to where you have, one or two of these valves left to adjust, so you can actually watch that particular cam lobe and wait for it to point upwards. So, but I just thought I'd catch you guys up on this. And this is not a difficult procedure by any means. It's not even really time consuming. It's actually kind of easy and kind of fun. The adjusters they're tough. I mean, they take some torque to turn, so keep that in mind. I mean, I was using a 3/8 ratchet and 14 millimeter crow's foot, but I'd have probably been smarter if I'd have used something 1/2 inch or, something with a little bit more leverage. I just didn't want to round out any of those adjusters, because if you round off one of those adjusters, you're going to be in trouble. But yeah, this gives you an opportunity to kind of inspect your camshaft and look for any wear and stuff like that. But we're going to go ahead and button this up, slap the valve cover back on it with a new gasket and some new copper crush washers, and we'll start it up and run it for a little bit, and we'll change the oil, and yeah, this part of the project will be done. So thank you for joining.